Breaking news tonight, where the United Nations got the full Donald Trump treatment. A remarkable day of diplomacy, both high and low, has ended with the president's harshest warning yet for the Kremlin tyrant Vladimir Putin. In a dramatic shift, he now insists Ukraine can and should win back all of its land. And he vowed to give NATO all the bullets and bombs it needs to drive back the paper tiger Russians to the 2022 borders. It's a huge reversal from months of hints that Kyiv might have to surrender land to end the war. But before that wasn't even the only news the president was making today. Let's look at how one of the most bizarre days on the world stage has played out. Arriving at the United Nations, POTUS clearly had a few things he wanted to get off his chest, and the useless talking shop didn't know what had hit them.
And I'm really good at predicting things, you know. They actually said during the campaign they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true. I've been right about everything.
In his tirade, Trump slammed Europe's nuclear cowardice and revealed what he really thought about climate change.
They said global warming will kill the world, but then it started getting cooler, so now they could just call it climate change, because that way they can't miss. It's climate change, because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, this climate change, it's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion.
But the president saved his biggest bashes for Britain. No longer on best behaviour, now he's had his Kodak moment with King Charles. This was Donald Trump unleashed.
Oil and gas, such as essentially closing the great North Sea oil. Oh, the North Sea, I know it so well. Aberdeen was the oil capital of Europe. What a tremendous asset for the United Kingdom. And I hope the Prime Minister is listening, because I told it to him 3 days in a row. That's all he heard. North Sea oil, North Sea, because I want to see them do well.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall for that lecture, but he wasn't done with the UK yet. A burning indictment.
And I have to say, I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible mayor, and it's been so changed, so changed. Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. This cannot be sustained.
You might very well be thinking, how did that fiery script even make it onto a teleprompter? Well, it didn't.
And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter, because the teleprompter is not working. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble.
The White House crying sabotage tonight on teleprompters and escalators, but you bet the haters in the audience would have rather he'd stuck to the usual platitudes. We're going to pull all that apart tonight, but first, Ukraine. Has Trump finally abandoned his overtures to Vladimir Putin, or is this just another zigzag in his foreign policy? Joining me live tonight, Tom Tugendhat, former British Security Minister and former US Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Good evening, gentlemen. Mr. Tugendhat, to you first. You've been watching the Ukraine war from long before it started. Every move and every inch of diplomacy and every inch of those borders. This is a remarkable turnaround from a president who was saying just a few weeks ago that Ukrainian land, was on the negotiating table.
Look, I think President Trump has made it extremely clear tonight and in different ways at different points that this is about the security of Europe and the security of the United States, and he's standing up for both of them. And so I'm extremely grateful that he's made these statements. I welcome them very heartily. And what he's done is he's made the completely clear point that Russia is frankly a paper tiger. The way in which Putin has turned Russia from a great country into, bluntly, a petrol station with a mafia attached is broken a great nation. And he's standing up for the United States' interest, and he's standing up for Europe's interest, and he's standing up for British interests, and I welcome it all.
There's a big song and dance a few months ago, well, less than that, 6 weeks ago, when he met with Putin in Alaska. Is this a tacit admission, Mr. Tugendhat, that the president's got this wrong? Russia was thumbing his nose at his attempts to broker peace. The mythical meeting with Zelensky has never happened, and the war has rolled on. Is this a reversal, or from a position of strength or a position of weakness?
Look, I respect anybody who tries to bring peace to any area of the world. And what the president of the United States has done is he's tried to bring peace, and he's realized what many of us have also realized, which is that Putin's simply not interested. What he wants to do is to export violence in order to secure his own regime. Now, President Trump has realized that, and what he's doing now is he's making sure that that export of violence doesn't kill any more Ukrainians. Now, I welcome that. I mean, I think he's doing exactly the right thing. We've got to stop this export of violence, and we've got to make sure that we stand up for those who are being murdered by Russians every single day, which they are even right now, sadly.
Ambassador Hsu, a welcome shift in tone from President Trump, but does it have the heft of the United States behind it?
Well, it does. It does, Harry. This is the President of the United States. He made it very clear. He was not equivocal. It is true. He's been in different places before. But this is a pretty clear statement. Not only that, NATO should shoot down airplanes, the Russian airplanes, if they come into airspace, but also that, yeah, Ukraine should take back Ukraine can win. Ukraine can win. It can take back its territory. It can stop the Russians. This is a very clear statement from the president.
Ambassador, Ukraine could win with all the resources they need. Obviously, it's an incredibly controversial domestic policy point in the United States. Trump's base, Trump was elected on a pledge to end this war and end it quickly with possibly no further taxpayer contributions from the American public. How do you think this is going to land domestically for the president? And will he have the support in Congress to allow him, in Congress and from his base, to allow him to effectively enter this war on a bigger scale?
Absolutely. I am convinced that he's got the political coverage. I'm sure you've reported, people have noticed that in the United States Senate, there's a bill that is supported by 85 senators. 85 senators. This doesn't usually happen in this country, in this Congress. But 85 senators have signed on to a bill that would put incredibly tough tariffs on essentially on Russia. It would put tariffs on those nations that buy Russian oil in an attempt to cut off the funds going to Russia so that keeps their war machine going. And just in the last 2 weeks, the Europeans have come up with a scheme, with a good idea, a clever proposal that would take advantage of that $300 billion worth of Russian central bank funds that are stuck in central bank in European banks. There's a way to get at that would not require U.S. taxpayers, not require European taxpayers, not require British taxpayers. No, it would require the Russians to pay for all those weapons.
Tom Tugendhat, you spent years in government trying to do that very, very knotty issue of freeing up Russian assets. It started with interest on billions of pounds sitting in Russian banks. It is an incredibly complicated move to do, and one also that is sort of greeted with high suspicion from anyone investing in the West that one day they may be the ones having their assets seized. Do you think realistically there's enough unity in the West, enough unity within the alliances to do that, to actually raid those assets?
Yes, I do, actually. And I don't think it's about others. It's about Russia. Let's be absolutely clear. There are no other countries that have invaded sovereign states or recognized states of the United Nations. There are absolutely no other states that have behaved in the violent and dictatorial way that Russia has. This is not anything that could be possibly paralleled with any other state of the UN or any ally or any treaty state. This is a Russian issue, and I wish it wasn't so. But the reality is Russia has invaded Ukraine and Georgia. It has threatened Estonia. It has crossed it has put planes over Poland. It has attacked in various different ways Lithuania and Latvia. This is a very sui generis. This is a Russian issue. It's nothing to do with any other country. It's to do with Russia.
A question to you both. As Mr. Tugendhat points out there, we've had drones buzzing other NATO members, other European countries. Is this the end of sort of Donald Trump, the good cop, in terms of saying, trying to talk nicey-nicey in Alaska, trying to bring people to the table? Now we're seeing bad cop. And do you think it will work, or will we just continue to see the Russians thumbing their nose at NATO, thumbing their nose at the West? Ambassador, you first, please.
Yeah, I do think that this is a shift. I think this is President Trump taking on a very hard line, and it's welcome. You're right. He hasn't always been there. He had that ill-fated meeting, probably ill-advised meeting in Alaska But then the Europeans showed up with President Zelensky and made their case. Since then, it has been very clear. And something over the last couple of days has really been clear to President Trump. And he's made these statements not just at the UN, but then afterwards about taking down Russian airplanes. So, yes, I think this is a shift that is going to be decisive.
Mr. Tugendhat, I mean, is good cop going to stick around as long as bad cop, or will we see another flip-flop, do you think?
Look, I welcome the president's position. I welcome the fact that the United States has made this position very clear. And frankly, I've always expected the United States to be on the side of right on this, because the United States has always taken the side of right. It has always defended democracy. It has always defended freedom. And today, President Trump is absolutely in keeping with the American history and the American psyche. Is defending the people who are standing on the side of freedom.
Ambassador, we all know that Donald Trump could be a tricky customer, to put it gently. And in reading the runes, as I often have to do, on Truth Social of his big essay that he published less than 2 hours ago, it does seem to suggest that the president is saying, well, yes, this is up to NATO now, this is up to Europe now, we will give Europe the tools to do it. Could we actually, am I being too cynical to see perhaps him possibly stepping back from this conflict and saying, you know what, you guys sort it out. You can do it. You could do it if you had the will. Is there am I being too paranoid there?
You might be a little paranoid. You might be a little cynical there. Yes, I think a couple of things about President Trump that you've mentioned. One is he likes to win. He does not like to lose. And he has his eye on a prize. He's not going to get a prize if he walks away. If he just turns it over to the Europeans. And that's not going to win. It's going to take a combination, the alliance of the Americans and Europeans and the Brits with the Ukrainians, and that's what it's going to take to win. And I think he's figured that out.
Do you think he'll get that Nobel Peace Prize in the end?
If he gets a peace that respects if he gets the peace that goes back to 1991 borders, which he just talked about, in a just and lasting peace with Europe on the horizon for Ukraine, that is Ukraine going into the European Union and eventually NATO, I would absolutely give him the prize.
Mr. Tugendhat, look, the state of European defences, we've talked about at length in the past, but, you know, divisions, battalions, barely enough to mobilise between them. Can the Europeans really do this on their own? And how much help would they need from the United States in terms of access to, putting it bluntly, bombs, missiles, bullets, weaponry? And are they in any real state to police a peace in Ukraine, given the shoddy state of defence spending across the continent for 25 years?
Look, Harry, the Chief of the Defence Staff, now just retired, put it very clearly. He said correctly that had a snail and the Russian army crossed the border on the same day a few years ago, that snail would now be in Poland. Well, you know as well as I do that the Russian army is nowhere near Poland. They have completely failed. They are a broken force. They are a complete joke of an army. Sadly, they have a very, very powerful weapon system in their artillery, and they are murdering many, many people. But let's not pretend that the Russian army is anything in that sense to be feared. It isn't. And any NATO army could destroy it in a day. So the idea that the Europeans are somehow not capable is just not true. The Europeans are absolutely capable of taking this on. And what we need to see is Europeans, you're quite right, stepping up. We also need to see that confidence given by the United States. And that whole NATO operation is the whole point about it. Because what it is the alliance of Europeans and Americans all standing together and making sure that this vile tyranny doesn't stand. Now, you know, we know that Putin is an old man. He's a sick man. He's exporting violence because he knows that he has no power left. That's why he's put his cousins and his brothers and his nephews into places of power. He doesn't trust anybody anymore. We know that the Russian state currently is broken. We know that they are completely falling apart.
We can but hope. Gentlemen, you've both had long, distinguished diplomatic careers. I just want to focus on the rest of the day at the United Nations. I have never seen a speech like that at the UN. Look, love him or hate Donald Trump, there were a couple of truth bullets there for the international diplomatic order and the talking shop that the United Nations has so often become. Ambassador, to you first. How do you think that would have gone down in the room? You would have seen these meetings up close. You would have seen diplomacy behind the scenes. I imagine the West is slightly reeling tonight.
This was a pretty blunt speech. You're absolutely right. And as you point out, when he was there before in his first term, he was more subdued. There's nothing holding him back at this point. So he is letting it fly, did let it fly. But you're right, there were some good points. The Security Council, the UN Security Council, of course, they were not addressing today. It was a General Assembly, but the Security Council is frozen, is stymied, has been frustrated by the Russians on this war that we've just been talking about. So the UN does have problems. If they're going to deal with these problems, they're going to have to face them head on.
So there's methods of the madness you see in Trump diplomacy, 47's diplomacy, very different from 45.
Well, there were two good speeches today, actually, frankly. There was one from President Trump, which was as blunt as you stated. The second was from Radek Sikorski, the Polish foreign minister, who made it extremely clear that if Russian planes cross Polish borders again and they complain about the fact that there is now Russian wreckage on Polish soil, they will be whinging for nothing. And they'll be whinging for nothing because the Poles have warned them and warned them and warned them. And Radek Sikorski is right. Stand up for your country. Defend yourself.
One word answer from you both, please, and I'll let you go. Are we any closer to peace tonight? Yes or no? Ambassador?
Yes.
Mr. Tugendhat?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Unity in the West. We have saved the West. Thank you both for joining me. Thank you very much. Right, here to pick all that apart, my Sun colleagues, Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, Ryan Sabey, and The Sun's Defence Editor, Jerome Starkey. To you, Jerome, first. Quite the turnaround, as we've been discussing there with my guests. What's brought this on?
Well, I think the risk, Harry, is that Donald Trump is repeating what he's been told by the last person he spoke to. He's gone to America.
You took my thought right out of my head. That was my next question.
Well, of course, he's had this fantastic state visit to the UK. He's had the opportunity to listen to the British view on this. And that is very clearly what he's been repeating. We heard from the head of Britain's MI6 last week saying that Vladimir Putin is stringing the West along. He has absolutely zero interest in peace. We also heard from Donald Trump almost simultaneously during that visit to London saying that he feels let down by Putin and the relationship hasn't worked. Now, I mean, I was slightly nervous listening to Tom and the ambassador, your previous guests, that their belief that this is a turning point perhaps reflects a triumph of hope over experience, because we've seen Donald Trump's pendulum swing wildly many times in this presidency. And I know certainly just from taking the temperature in Ukraine and among Ukrainians that I think whilst they will welcome what he said, they're going to wait very much and see what he does.
Did you detect, I put it to the ambassador there, Jerome, did you detect a slight, if I'm reading between the lines, there is a slight stepping back on this? It's like, we'll give you the equipment, but A, you're going to have to pay for it. B, this is a European and NATO issue. It did seem slightly detached. Is this Donald Trump saying, you know what, I've tried my hardest, over to you guys?
Well, we don't see consistency, and we never have seen consistency. Although I should perhaps caveat that with what we've heard from Trump before, saying that he's going to be hard, he's going to take a hard line on Putin, that he's going to run out of patience, whilst Trump has never followed through on those threats thus far. We have sort of simultaneously heard from his top officials, I think it was Marco Rubio, saying exactly that. So whilst Trump would be threatening action, Rubio would be saying, well, this is not our conflict. So that two-pronged approach, suggesting that he's fed up with Russia, but actually if his peace plan doesn't work, then indeed America's going to shrug its shoulders and walk away. And that's hardly a coherent policy to berate the aggressor, which is threatening the security of Europe and indeed the security of the world. And when your peace plan doesn't work, to give that aggressor, to give Russia effectively, or risk giving Russia what they want by walking away and abandoning your allies. It is not a coherent, it is not a consistent position. But unfortunately, that has become the norm from the Trump White House.
Ryan Sabey, I mean, the state visit is well and truly over, isn't it? I mean, yes, last week we had smiling, grinning, waving, Donald Trump on good behaviour, you know, the lovely speech at the palace about how close and wonderful Britain is, and here we have him once again returning to his comfort zone of, slamming the United Kingdom, slamming Sadiq Khan, lecturing on North Sea oil, whether he's right or wrong. It's it's an astonishing pulpit for Britain to be berated like it's some banana republic that needs a lashing from the UN.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And you go back to that speech in the press conference in Chequers, and as you say, he was on his best behaviour. But as soon as he got back on that plane, got back on Air Force One, he was hitting out at Sadiq Khan, saying about the state banquet and the fact that Sadiq wasn't invited. And you go forward to today, he actually mentioned Sadiq Khan. Can you imagine? We were sitting there watching it, and you just can't believe that this guy, Donald Trump, is actually talking about Sadiq Khan in the UN General Assembly. It's a bit like a Donald Trump greatest hits today when he talks about Britain, all those sort of bad things that he thinks of Britain, he thinks of Sadiq Khan, he thinks of North Sea oil, and they all got a play out on that such a massive stage. And I think that's where Donald Trump, he plays those greatest hits every single time. And he said again and again during that Chequers meeting that Sir Keir Starmer should change his mind when it comes to North Sea oil, and said he reminded him for 3 days. And he's brought that out into the open today as well.
That was the line that jumped out for me as well. I know it was all like smiles and waves and pomp and circumstances last week, but what are you hearing about how it really was behind the scenes? It sounds to me pretty like it was pretty tempestuous. I mean, we know that Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump have spent some time alone. Starmer then came out immediately and sort of split with the White House on recognising Palestine. He's about to fly to India next week to see Modi when Trump has just slapped 50% tariffs because India is still buying Russian oil. That's going to be an awkward handshake while all this is going on. As you say, we talked about the wind farms and the oils. The Sharia law thing, we've discussed before, is obviously way overblown. But, for all the nice words last week, the special relationship looks a little bit testy right now, doesn't it, Ryan?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you draw the royals into it, I think Donald Trump is on his best behaviour. It's all pleasantries. But I think you can even sense the tension during that press conference where he says that when Donald Trump said there were disagreements with Keir Starmer. And when a prime minister or a president mentions disagreements in a public forum like that, you know that it's really, really tense behind the scenes. And when you remember when Sir Keir Starmer actually stood up for Sadiq Khan at that sort of media conference up in Scotland a few months ago, and he said, Sadiq Khan is my friend. So I think on one level, they will obviously have this very, very good relationship with a special relationship, but you just feel that tension all the way through. And every time that Donald Trump talks about Sir Keir Starmer, great man, great friend, more liberal than me. You just tense, just feel there's something in the air between them.
Was that the Ryan Sabey Trump impersonation? I might save mine until the end of the show. Final shot from Jerome. Look, I was discussing it. I got into there with Tom Tugendhat, former British security minister, former veteran himself. Look, if Donald Trump, as he says, says over to Britain, over to Europe, over to NATO, are the European defence capabilities anywhere near up to scratch to police not only peace in Ukraine, but potentially now defending our friends in Estonia, in Poland, and basically anyone with a border in Russia? Or is this going to require even more spending and even more American support going forward?
Well, I think Tom was pretty bullish to describe the Russian army as a joke. Russia's been humiliated in Ukraine. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But what Russia has as its advantage is its ruthlessness and its willing to sacrifice vast numbers of men and material. And, of course, the Kremlin's willingness to launch these sub-threshold attacks, these provocations, and to try and split NATO allies. And that's why we've seen these incursions into Poland. It's why we've seen the Russian MiG-31s overflying Estonian airspace and a Polish oil platform in the Baltic Sea. Could European nations respond without America? Yes. Would they be fantastically stretched? Yes. crucially, America provides a lot of the kind of underpinning, the foundations of the NATO military architecture. So, for example, whilst Britain has an expeditionary force in 16 Air Assault Brigade that it can deploy, whilst it has a formidable Navy and Air Force, when it works with allies, when it operates with NATO partners, much of the architecture, the communications, the sort of nuts and bolts that perhaps we don't see or we don't imagine when we imagine militaries going to war, a lot of that is provided by America. It's things like the satellite communications. So it depends how far Donald Trump is prepared to walk away. And Europe is scrambling to try and make itself more independent, but certainly for the time being, it would be significantly easier for Europe to play a defining role were America to support it, even if that didn't mean putting American boots on the ground. But we'd need American support.